Welcome back to Project Hardway. In this video, we're going to put new rings on the pistons and assemble the short block of this 402 cubic inch big block Chevy for my 1979 Camaro. Check it out. Okay, quick overview of the pistons. If you know that symbol, you know that this is a Speed Pro piston. You can tell by looking at it, it's a dome piston. That means that the piston protrudes above the deck of the block and into the combustion chamber in the head. If you look up that part number there, L2242, you'll find that this is a forged aluminum piston. It's a pretty good deal I got there. Those were in the engine when I got it, so it makes up for the large combustion chamber on those 454 heads that are on it. Makes it essentially about a 81 to 82 cc combustion chamber. These rods are stock big block rods, but they are all forged, and this engine was already fitted with ARP hardware on the rods. I've cleaned up this one. This is number 1. I've still got to do the other 7, but we've got Hastings rings, and they packaged them top, number 2 the middle, and number 3 for the oiling rings. So I'll break those out of the package, show you how I put the rings onto the pistons, and then we'll plop it into the block. Okay, so first we're going to start with the oiling ring. Now the oiling ring has got 2 packages. There are 16 of these thin rings. One will go on the bottom. Then you will get this style of ring that goes in there, and it gets sandwiched between another one of these. So, little thing I learned watching Hot Rod Garage, stick it on there, maybe, and spin it around. Actually, that wasn't Hot Rod Garage, that was Roadkill Extras, when they were, I think when they were building that 360 Mopar engine. So I got that bottom thin ring in there. Now we'll put, this thing can just kind of slide in there. It's very springy. This picks up oil, holds oil, traps it, and then allows it to oil the cylinder walls as the piston moves up and down inside the cylinder. If I can get the damn thing set down in the groove eventually. Maybe. I wonder if I ordered the wrong size rings, or I'm an idiot. I'm gonna go with the latter. I'm an idiot. There's a small bit of backing on there. I believe that, yeah, that's right. This goes in first. Now it's set down in there. We'll put this under. Put this under that groove, under that ring, and then spin it around. As we spin it around, slide it into place. Make sure that you get this lined up underneath there. Now that's slid into place there, and we'll get another one of those thin rings. That completes the oiling ring set. We put the middle ring in. Now these rings tend to have some type of either machining or a stamping on them. If you look closely, you see a divot, little dimple there. That's going to go towards the top. So we'll put that in there just like that. Now, these thicker rings, you gotta be careful, because if you put too much force on them, flex them too much, bend them too much, you can make them snap. Then you've got to order another ring. And depending on what you got, you may have to order a whole new set just for that one ring you screwed up. But there's that one. Set in there. Now the top ring. I guess in this case with the compression ring on these pistons, it doesn't really matter. Slide that in there. Spin it around. Bring it around. And it's set. Now some guys will tell you that gap there, we put one gap here and then clock the gap on the other ring 180 degrees or opposite. Truth of the matter is that doesn't really matter because these rings are going to spin around on the piston and move around as it goes, as they set into place and are getting thrown through the cylinder walls, you know, thousands of times per minute. But I'm going to leave it just like that anyway. So I've got to do that for the other 7 cylinders. I'll get that done and then we will start putting them in the engine. All right, so what do we got? My glasses are back on. Got a different shirt on. Got a pile of rings and bearings on the floor and 8 pistons cleaned up and loaded, ready to go back in the engine with fresh bearings and rings. I have my block set up to where the driver's side bank is vertical. I've got the number 1 cylinder. The crank is set to the bottom dead center portion for that. Reason being is that with the cylinder vertical and with this down here, I can drive the piston in and it will clear, the studs on the rod will clear this journal. Hopefully I won't nick it. And I've got enough space down here underneath the engine where I can put the cap on and cinch the fasteners up. So with the old finger slicer 3000, we're gonna get that set up. So first things first, I've got my number 1 piston and rod here. Not all engines are like this, but let's see if we can get it to focus on it. Might not be able to tell, but each of these rods and caps is stamped with the number of the cylinder that it came out of. With these dome pistons, I'm gonna want the protruding part of the dome to be at the bottom of the block deck. That's where the open part of the chamber is on the cylinder head. That way I know I've got it in there correctly. Here's my cap. It's also stamped with the number 1 on it. When you put these in, you want the tab that is on the bearing to be on the same side. And when they go in, they'll be opposite of each other. Once I get everything on, I'll slide that on there, hand start the bolts, cinch them up with a socket, and once I've got all 8 done, I'll go back and torque it down. Okay, so I've got this cap full of oil here. I like to put some oil inside the cylinder wall and maybe put a little bit on the piston and the ring, just so everything's not dry when I put it in. Don't necessarily want to use engine assembly lube. Maybe a little thick, maybe a little harder to get your rings to set on the first fire up if you've got too much of that globby stuff in there. So a little bit of engine oil just to help things slide in. Put some on face of the rings, on the piston skirts. Piston skirts will be the first thing to contact the bore. When I set the piston in, I don't necessarily want to have it go all the way down. But the important thing here is that when I put my piston ring compressor on, I make sure that I've got all the rings inside that compressor before I start driving it in. Because if they're not set in and they stick out and they pop out from underneath that compressor, it'll break the rings, and there I am going back to summitracing.com. This cheapo style right here, it goes around the piston, you cinch it down, make sure you've got it flush against the deck of the block so that nothing can go wrong with your rings and everything goes in nice and even like it should. I can put this on the piston before I put it in the block, or I can set the piston down and then push it back up a little bit by the rod there, by the rod cap bolt. Essentially, I'm going to cinch this thing down real good. Take a look at it, just double check, make sure I've got everything like it should be. No rings are sticking out. Everything's compressed. Press on it a little bit. Make sure everything's flush on the deck of the block. Then you can take something like a wood handled hammer and just kind of start tapping it in. And if you're going in and you feel it bind up as if the ring is popping out and hitting the deck, stop, pull the piston out and start over again. Do not want to break your rings. As you can see, as I drive down, the bottom of the rod and the rod cap bolts are sticking out. And now, like that, the piston is inside the cylinder. The rings are all in there. And now it's just a matter of guiding it down. Make sure I've got a little bit of engine assembly lube on that crank journal. Just something for it to slide on, because we will have to rotate the engine a few times while putting the other pistons in. And once we start getting everything ready to set the timing up for the timing chain. There it is. It is on that crank journal. I'm going to take my rod cap, a little kiss of assembly lube on it. You know, you can put as much lube on these things as you want, but as the engine sits here, any excess is still going to drip out of wherever you've got it and leave just whatever's on the surface. Make sure I've got my bearing seated in my cap, lining it up correctly, wiggle it on there a little bit. Now I can hand start the nuts, grab my 9/16 ratchet, wrench, whatever you want to use. We're not going full torque, we're just snugging it down. And since I didn't get the rod cap seated all the way against the rod, go back and forth a little bit, walk it up the rod cap bolts. Once you've got it seated up against itself, that piston is in there and we're ready to move on to the next one. Once I've got all 8 cylinders in, all 8 pistons and rods in the block, I will go through and then torque each rod cap bolt to 45 foot-pounds. Not going to go through all that. We'll put it on a time lapse real quick and let you see that in the fast mode. Alright, there we have it. All 8 pistons, rods, connecting rod caps, everything is inside the block attached to the crankshaft. I did have some struggles with a couple of those with the rings popping out of the bottom. I don't know if I was just getting in a hurry or if my little cheapo ring compressor has had enough, but we got everything in. I didn't break any rings, and so now we're ready to set the torque. Torque is already set on my wrench to 45 foot-pounds. Remember, even consistent pressure, just like with the main bolts. Might have to click them a little bit. There we go. 45 foot-pounds on that one. And that one. That's that. The bottom end, as far as crank rods and pistons, is assembled, ready to go. Engine turns over freely, doesn't bind up anywhere. So next, I'll pop the oil pump on there. Oil pump distributor drive rod. This oil pan right here is funky. I'm gonna try to pressure wash that. If I can't get it to come as clean as I want it to, so I can paint it like I did the block, I've got a buddy that's got a sandblaster. and I'll get him to shoot the thing off real quick for me. But I mean, essentially we're ready to throw the heads on it. Okay, so real quick, I wasn't planning on filming painting the oil pan. I was just gonna have it done and have it on the engine. But after hitting it with degreaser and the pressure washer, she's nasty. And I've got a buddy that's got a sandblaster, but I don't know when I could get a hold of him, when I could get in touch with him, when I'd get it back. So I guess we just gotta do what the name implies and just do it the hard way. So I'm gonna smack that with some sandpaper, get it better than that, and then you'll see it once it's back on the engine. All right, so off camera, I got the oil pan taken care of. That thing was bad. Just after pressure washing it, it was funky. But I ended up, instead of having it sandblasted, because that's too easy, I got my angle grinder with the little round disc things that take stuff off, that, you know, those things. And went after it, got it all taken off for the most part, hand sanded it, painted it, turned out just fine. And that timing cover came out so well, you'd almost think I bought a new one. Well, that's because I did. Not only was this thing just funky to begin with, somebody took a chrome one and tried to paint it black and did a terrible job, but I noticed inside here, see that little groove around the bottom edge there? This thing didn't quite fit with the double roller chain that I've got on the engine, so it was self-clearancing. So I got on Summit, and I was actually able to find that timing cover with the old bow tie there and the Chevrolet in there, and it came already pre-painted. So it's not exactly the same color orange, but it's close enough for what we got going on that it won't be so noticeable. Bought that, slapped it on there, and it's ready to go. Brand new hardware. We're done. The bottom end's sealed up. I'm not going back in there. Motor's flipped over. Everything now is all up top. So let's get to those cylinder heads. Well, that's going to do it for this video, guys. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it. Check out my next video where we make the heads, match the block, and we put everything else together, ready to go back in the car. Remember, guys, don't be afraid to do things the hard way. See you next time.